So buffer stock is not one of those new additions. It has been there for quite some time और हम usually buffer stock को agriculture market के point of view से ही पढ़ाते आए हैं. But I feel that there have been some sort of course related adjustments that have been done. Um, जिसकी वजह से इसका I think now based on the questions that have come so far, I think enough knowledge and all has been discussed. So अब I think we can sum up the information that you need to know. Um, for example, there is this question which says, with the help of a diagram, assess whether the benefits of a buffer stock um, scheme for an agriculture product always outweighs its disadvantage. The question is purely about buffer stock. It has nothing to do with any other strategies in the agriculture product market that you can talk about. It's purely about how buffer stock works and how it doesn't. लेकिन 12 mark के अंदर they have asked for a diagram. So नॉर्मली आई थिंक जो बुक्स वगैरह के अंदर या कोई सर्टेन प्लेसेस के अंदर जो इन्होंने डायग्राम दिया हुआ है बफर स्टॉक का सो वन ऑफ द डायग्राम्स आई थिंक आई एम एक्चुअली मिसिंग आउट ऑन अनदर क्वेश्चन देयर इज एक 8 मार्कर का भी बफर स्टॉक पे आ तो चुका है आई सी इफ आई कैन फाइंड इट but as far as the diagram goes for the buffer stock we make a simple demand and supply diagram. Okay, we have a demand and a supply diagram where we have an equilibrium price and quantity. So the first thing that we should, other than the diagram, I think this is how I would have started this question. सबसे पहली बात यह है कि buffer stock, what is buffer stock? What is the purpose of buffer stock, right? So the first thing we want to mention about buffer stock is that the prime reason why buffer stock is imposed is so that you can maintain the price fluctuation in a particular product market, जो इस केस के अंदर agriculture market है. So we could say like something like buffer stock scheme is designed to like minimize या maintain price fluctuation, right? Now this is from Bamford, what I'm about to say, and Bamford में because there's only like one small paragraph on buffer stock, and जब आप questions को देखते हैं तो it doesn't make sense कि फिर इतना सारा कैसे हो सकता है. When we're talking about buffer stock, एक जो past के अंदर diagram that we used to make was something like कि अच्छा if the supply increases. Right? So if the supply increases, the prices will fall down. So what we'll do is we're going to take this excess because of a good harvest. We're going to take this excess supply, or let's call it surplus in this case, and we're going to take this surplus and we're going to stock it, right? We're going to send it to the buffer stock. Okay. And in future, if there is a poor harvest, and if the supply curve shifts to the left, something like this, we can clearly see that the price wants to go up and there is a shortage which comes about. Like this entire thing explains that there is a shortage. And so what we want to do is we want to fill this shortage by releasing the buffer stock. Okay. So this was one of the diagrams which I remember कि हमारे variant में ही एक question आया था, and this was one of the diagrams which was acceptable. ठीक है. I feel कि
There's no minimum maximum price.
we there should be actually ये वाला accept कर लिया था उन्होंने. But in my opinion, what we should be doing is we should be dealing with that minimum maximum and Bamford में because उसकी बात हुई भी है. So so basically what we should be saying is कि ठीक है जी buffer stock is designed to minimize या maintain the price fluctuations and uh, it uses minimum and maximum prices. It uses minimum and maximum price to maintain price fluctuation. You basically get 1 mark based on that case study जो अभी नवंबर में आई है. तो उस हिसाब से just mentioning that minimum and maximum prices can be used to maintain the price fluctuation, you get 1 mark, and then you can have that minimum and maximum. So आप उसको place कर लेते हैं. Let me just remove this for a second and I'll just walk you through exactly what needs to be done in this one. Yeah. So, yeah. So we're going to have a minimum price and a maximum price. We don't want the effective ones, right? We don't want the effective ones right now. Um, so basically, we say is that let's say you have maximum price up here, and we can see that maximum above equilibrium is ineffective, right? So that's perfectly fine right now. So we have both of them as ineffective. You have an upper range and a lower range, and you want the prices to stay within this range. And then we say that if there is a good harvest, the supply
Why do you
curve
need
will,
ineffective?
because you can't have them both in one single diagram. अगर ये, uh, the thing is, initially they're ineffective, but like for example, the prices are within this range. We don't want the prices to go above this. We don't want the prices to go below this. Okay? अगर मैं P max यहाँ लगा देता हूं तो then तो problem आ जाएगा. Then you'll have a shortage. The prices can't go above this. So right now we need the ineffective ones. Now that the supply has increased and shifted to the right because of, let's say, a bumper crop or a good harvest, so because the supply curve has shifted to the right, now the prices wants to fall. And now it wants to fall below the P minimum. Now it has become effective. So now the prices will not allow the prices to fall below this level. Anything below this level will be um, illegal. So now the minimum price has become effective. जब supply curve right पे गया और a P minimum above equilibrium हो गया. So obviously this is not allowed. So as a result, we can see there is a surplus in the market. ठीक है? Now the government or the producer, whoever is running the buffer stock, will intervene and they're going to buy the excess. अब excess, तो अगर आपको प्राइस को वापस P0 पे लेके जाना है, तो then you know कि कितना सरप्लस है. राइट? आप P0 की प्राइस के ऊपर देख लें that quantity demanded is
Do you
here.
say ineffective minimum maximum price?
No, you're not going to say effective minimum. You're just simply going to say that the government is going to use minimum and maximum prices to maintain price fluctuation. That's it. You don't need to say कि ये effective है कि ineffective है. When you place it, it's ineffective. When certain shifts will happen, it will become effective. Scenarios के अंदर effective बनेंगे. You can't have minimum and both effective maximum and minimum in a same diagram. It's just not possible. Because price is either going to be below equilibrium अगर maximum लगा हुआ है, और अगर मिनिमम लगा हुआ है तो इट विल बी अबव इक्विलिब्रियम. सो एक सिंगल प्रोडक्ट के अंदर you can't have both effective maximum and minimum. It's just not possible. You can have only one of them. अभी हमने दोनों लगाए, दोनों इनइफेक्टिव है. डिफरेंट सिनेरियोज के अंदर वन ऑफ देम विल बिकम इफेक्टिव. Right now, when you have a buffer stock, as in if you have a supply increasing, so minimum price has come into play. Maximum is ineffective. It has nothing. This is the highest the price can go. Like, prices are already below this level, so maximum is not operating right now. It will only operate if the supply falls and the price wants to go above the maximum. वो तब होगा जब पुअर हार्वेस्ट वाली सिचुएशन आएगी. राइट नाउ it's not playing any role such, but it's just there as a buffer that in case if the price wants to go up, this will come into play and limit and bring it back down. Am I making sense? So right now you just placed it as a buffer, as a range that price wants to fluctuate. As long as the supply curve, like this one, जो हमने बनाया है, if this supply curve is like here, and if it increases to the right, what will happen? Well, the supply curve will shift to the right, equilibrium prices will fall. The prices can fall. It's within the legal range. Minimum price has nothing to do with it. Maximum has nothing to do with it. And so the prices can fall. कब तक गिर सकती है? Till this point. Prices can fall till this point, but if the supply increases further more, now the prices cannot fall. So minimum all of a sudden will ring bells that the prices are trying to go below what the government has proposed as minimum. So now there is a surplus in the market. Government needs to intervene and they need to pick this if they want to bring it back up here. लेकिन if they want to go back to P0, तो फिर सप्लाई कितनी पिक होनी चाहिए? ये जो मैंने पर्पल से मार्किंग की है, बिकॉज P0 के ऊपर क्वांटिटी डिमांडेड इज हियर, quantity supplied is out there, so the government needs to pick this entire quantity if they want the prices to go up. देखो, कहीं पर भी बफर स्टॉक में ये बात नहीं होती है that the government is fixing the price. The whole idea is to maintain price fluctuation. And this is the range of price fluctuation. If the government brings it even closer, तो उन्होंने प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन की रेंज को लिमिट कर दिया है. ठीक है. लेकिन if you want to go extreme, then you can say that the government has actually fixed. अब ये आपका मिनिमम और मैक्सिमम दोनों एक पॉइंट पे आ गए. दैट मीन्स ये अब आपका फिक्स हो गया है. अब यहाँ प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन की तो बात नहीं हो रही, ये तो प्राइस फिक्सिंग है. दैट प्राइस कैन नीदर गो अप और डाउन बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट ने मिनिमम और मैक्सिमम लगाया है. Normally, there is supposed to be a range within which you can allow the fluctuations to take place. एक छोटी मोटी सी रेंज होनी चाहिए बिकॉज देखो, इट इज इम्पॉसिबल फॉर द गवर्नमेंट टू नो कि हमें मार्केट में से एग्जैक्टली प्राइस को फिक्स रखने के लिए एग्जैक्टली कितना शॉर्टेज है, कितना सरप्लस है जो हमें उठाना है. सो यू विल अलाउ स्लाइट फ्लक्चुएशन इन द मार्केट एंड इट्स एक्सेप्टेबल. तो ये बेसिकली मैं इस डायग्राम के थ्रू यही बात समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं हम, that there is a range within which you can allow the prices to fluctuate. So anyhow, again, this is just added knowledge that we're talking about. So एक मार्क आपको फिर फर्दर किस बात पे मिलता है? टू एक्सप्लेन that how buffer stock works. तो पहली बात जो आपने बतानी है, मस्ट बात जो बतानी है, that if the supply increases, then market price will fall. However, if it falls below the minimum price, then government will intervene and buy and store the excess supply in the buffer stock. It's not complete. उसकी वजह से होगा क्या फिर? Therefore, the supply will fall and
The excess from the equilibrium or the supply curve?
sorry, what?
They buy the excess from the equilibrium or the supply curve?
Y-axis.
They buy the excess from the equilibrium
They
or the
will
supply curve?
buy. No, they're going to buy the excess. अब excess तो देखो हो क्या रहा है, that if you were here at this equilibrium and the supply has increased, तो ये excess है, ठीक है? Now it's even if prices थोड़ी सी नीचे गिरने भी दोगे तो there is an excess continuously. Now the question is, are they buying this much so that the prices come back to the minimum, or will they buy this much so the prices come back to the equilibrium, or in fact they can even buy this much? तो उसमें क्या होगा? If they buy this much, then the prices will come up here. As long as it's within this range, अब वो उनकी मर्जी है, because remember, how much money does the government have to buy? Maybe the government does not have enough funds. So all they can do is they can buy this much so that कि उनकी minimum range तक supply पीछे जाके minimum range तक आ जाए. But if they have enough funds, they can buy even more. They can buy even a lot if they feel कि हमारे पास buffer stock में same होना चाहिए. Because again, we're ruling out the idea that you're fixing the price. Again, another problem which will be part of your limitation is that प्राइस को P0 पे रखने के लिए हाउ डज द गवर्नमेंट नो कि हमें कितनी क्वांटिटी मार्केट में से उठानी है? इवन दैट्स अ क्वेश्चनेबल थिंग कि गवर्नमेंट के पास क्या इतनी नॉलेज है दैट इफ यू टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हीट मार्केट एंड इफ देयर इज अ बम्पर क्रॉप, does the market has or the government has enough information कि कितना सरप्लस हो गया है मार्केट में, और प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन के लिए हाउ मच एक्सेस डू वी नीड टू बाय? तो ये एक प्रॉब्लम होती है. सो इट्स we're just going to say कि सप्लाई बढ़ने से जो एक्सेस हो गया था which caused the prices to fall, we're just picking up the surplus in the market. Okay, excess supply in the market. I have seen kids writing that the government purchases all the supply. Right, now that's wrong. The government is not buying all the supply. All the supply का तो मतलब ये हो गया कि all the way from here to here government is buying. They're not buying all the supply. They're only buying excess. अब वो जो भी excess है, जितना भी excess है, जितना excess उठाएंगे उतना से price ऊपर जाना शुरू हो जाएगी. If they're able to buy the entire excess, the prices will come back to its original, right? But they're buying the excess, they're not buying the total supply. Don't do that mistake. We do look at it. Isal, we have penalized kids for writing that they buy all the stuff. They buy all the entire supply. They don't do that. They only buy the excess. And then a lot of kids do not write this, which is must. I'll tell you, in fact, इसमें क्या-क्या चीजें जरूरी थी हमारे आंसर में. Therefore, the supply will fall and the prices will rise and reduce fluctuation. In this case, it was a fall in the price. Okay. When you're doing buffer stock, when we are reading your answer, few things. Yes, by the way, the entire thing that I've written for in purple, ये एक mark था case study के अंदर. So what was necessary? That if the supply increases, uh, it will cause the prices to fall. फिर government जो है, they will buy and store. If you don't write the word store, the whole concept of buffer stock is not explained. And as a result, supply will fall and prices will rise. This was mandatory for you to write. ठीक है? And this is explaining कि किस तरीके से supply increases, price wants to fall down, government intervene, buys it and stores it, supply falls down, prices goes back up. That's one mark. फिर उसके बाद you have to write about that what if the supply falls. So फिर this was the third mark basically, that if there is a poor harvest and if the supply falls, the price wants to go up. If it goes so high up that it goes above the maximum, the government will intervene. They will release the shortage from the buffer stock that will increase the supply, bring the prices back down. So that was another one mark that you have to write in this. So we'll say, like, in case of poor harvest, supply will fall, causing price to rise. Government will release, this word is important, release from buffer stock.
Is this part of the definition, or how does it come under benefits?
This is not no, ये तो मैं तुमको सिर्फ एक intro दे रहा हूँ. Honestly, we haven't even gone into the question as yet. This I felt is one of those buffer stocky explanation which needs to be learnt, right? अब ये इस question में valid है कि नहीं है? Honestly, I haven't come to that as yet. I'll tell you कि कौन सा part. I just want कि ये knowledge के लिए तुम्हारे को पता होना चाहिए that this is how buffer stock works. Advantages, disadvantages, I'll just do it in a second. So government will release the buffer stock. This will increase supply and lower the price. So ये तीन मार्क थे जो केस स्टडी के अंदर when they asked you कि buffer stock how does it work, तो ये आपने लिखना होता है इस केस के अंदर. All right, so for this question, what needs to be done? With the help of a diagram, assess whether benefits of buffer stock scheme for an agriculture product always outweighs its disadvantages. So question already has a direction. You have to make a diagram. This is a reasonable diagram to make with the equilibrium price and quantity. They had accepted the one जिसके अंदर आपने simply एक fixed price रख ली हो. Okay, that was an acceptable one. Instead of a range, if you had done this purple thing and you had said कि ये देखें ये excess हो गया, this will go in the buffer stock, and ये shortage हो गया, this will be released. If you do this, they accepted it in 2023 के examination के अंदर. And this goes in the stock, right? So they had accepted this one. As far as the advantages go, अब advantages क्या होते हैं buffer stock के? Number one, when we are saying that the buffer stock is designed to maintain price fluctuations. Okay, so one of the advantage we're talking about is buffer stock का काम क्या है? Maintain price fluctuations. All right. Now, what are the advantages that comes through it? Buffer stock के क्या-क्या advantages हो सकते हैं? So you directly go into the question and you answer क्या-क्या advantages हैं buffer stock के. Number one, It helps you maintain prices. Okay. अब प्राइस मेंटेन करने के क्या एडवांटेजेस हो सकते हैं? So we have to think it from the consumers and producers point of view, basically. If we think from the producer's point of view, the advantages are that producers can plan their production in advance, and it sort of like creates a little certainty for their incomes. So that is one big advantage, that producer knows, okay, next year, if you're going to be selling sugar, this is the price of the sugar that the government maintains. So how much are we willing to supply at this price? How much money will we make? All right, excellent. This is what we should do, and this is how much we should produce. Because remember, if prices are not, and sometimes you allow the prices to fall, then the producers are discouraged for the coming year. Okay, and that can definitely affect the economy as a whole and the producers' motivation as a whole. So ये producers के लिए एक तरीके का incentive create करने का तरीका है, by helping them create certainty. Similarly, buffer stock can also help consumers in a way, because at the end of the day, if you're maintaining the prices, the consumer spending is certain and their purchasing power is sort of like maintained, right? Their purchasing power is maintained because they know that acha ji, sugar is not going to go up in value so much or is going to fall in value so much. So sort of like their welfare is taken care of by the government by trying to maintain the prices. So in दोनों scenarios के अंदर, overall, this is what one of the advantages that I can think of, कि both consumers and producers would actually like price stability. It just helps them with their expenditures and revenues, basically. And it keeps the economy stable, basically, right? Even the employment for that matter. Anything else you can think of इसके advantages के अंदर? Because mostly I can think of a lot of disadvantages in it.
Helps the government stable taxable.
Yeah, even from the government's point of view, okay. So number four, if they're doing this, from the government's point of view, we know okay, they can predict certainty in production and taxes एक तरफ ये, बट मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंटली अगर हम पाकिस्तानी गवर्नमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोचें, एंड दे डू कीप ट्रैक एंड बफर स्टॉक ऑफ शुगर एंड व्हीट, important stuff basically, तो उसके अंदर गवर्नमेंट इज माइंडफुल के at the end of the day they know that ठीक है हमारे पास एक बफर स्टॉक रखा है इकोनॉमी के अंदर, all of a sudden we're not going to have shortages and surpluses. So if that's not going to happen, then we're not going to need to import a lot, or we can, if there is an excess, we can export, right? So we can do these sort of things, and that can like help us manage our import and export of essential. Plus, government के particular individual point of view से भी, there is a big problem कि अगर economy के अंदर shortage और surplus हो जाए essential की, तो politically भी it's not a very good, you know, impression of the government that they were not able to manage that. तो absolutely आप कर सकते हैं. Disadvantage, I can think of a lot of disadvantages of buffer stock. Ek that we do have to talk about is that the government has to keep buffer stock, right? So there is funds constraint that the government might have, and obviously there is an opportunity cost involved in this whole thing, that the money is getting tied up, or if the government does not have enough, so they won't be effectively able to maintain. दूसरा आपका ये हो सकता है, um, what can we say, um, difficult to calculate the amount of buffer stock to maintain. What I mean by this is, if the government over purchases it or under purchases it, दोनों तरफ there are problems. एक तो number one about the price fluctuation, that if they over purchase it, the prices go above equilibrium, and if they don't buy enough, then the prices falls down. तो उसकी वजह से जो है मैनेजमेंट मुश्किल हो सकती है. अगेन, हाउ डू दे नो हाउ मच नीड्स टू बी बॉट? जब आप पूरे नेशनल लेवल के ऊपर देख रहे होते हैं, तो इट बिकम्स अ लिटिल डिफिकल्टी. फिर एक आपको बफर स्टॉक में ये भी एक प्रॉब्लम आ जाता है, like if you have continuous years of surpluses. क्योंकि sometimes what happens is producer also knows कि ठीक है जी, government is going to purchase the surplus, so they might end up overproducing. They might try to exploit the idea, right? कि उनको पता है कि government will not let the prices fall below the minimum prices, so they'll and they will have to buy it. So they'll, every time they're going to produce more and more and create a bigger excess supply and a surplus, because they're going to make more revenues because the government will buy the excess. So that's going to put a pressure on the government कि हम कितना surpluses खरीदते रहेंगे. And if they're keeping on building up buffer stock and there are no shortages coming, तो वो फिर वो buffer stock के अंदर भी जो है एग्रीकल्चर की क्योंकि बात हो रही है, तो एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर द होल पेरिशेबिलिटी का इशू आ जाता है. Perishability, because usually perishable goods cannot be stored for long, right? Cannot be stored for long, so buffer stock fails. So ये भी acceptable है. ये भी acceptable है that producers will exploit by over producing, knowing government will purchase excess. Right, so ये भी एक problem है. So plenty of problems that we can talk about in the buffer stock. And for your 8 marker level 2 के लिए, I think that for the diagram, दो advantages, दो तीन disadvantages, as much as you can write, honestly. For an 8 mark, that would be a good idea. Now, for the evaluation,
Can you
let's go
say
back to
trade unions and protests?
expand on that.
Those are the minimum and maximum prices.
Why would the trade union protest on that?
They want to keep higher or lower prices.
Um, I don't see how that applies to this. वो तो प्राइस को मेंटेन कर रहे हैं ना, so why would trade unions have issues with that?
Or workers.
Well, as in the workers would want the prices to fall, because we're not talking about
Yes,
wages, minimum wages की बात नहीं हो रही इधर. We wanna,
when prices are higher, then they'll get higher wages.
The prices, देखो, prices are high तो तब होता that demand and supply equilibrium से आप हटकर you pushing the prices a little on the higher side. So, more than the trade unions, it would be the consumer who should have problem with that. And eventually the government, because at the end of the day, then the government is not taking care of the welfare. Um, so union के point of view से, I don't see how this would apply and why they would be upset about it. यूनियन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से मिनिमम मैक्सिमम का तो सिर्फ ये हो सकता है दैट if they're stabilizing the prices, then from their perspective also they know कि अच्छा इस प्राइस में बिकेगा तो how much wage negotiation we can do basically for the interest of the members. ट्रेड यूनियन का काम ये है ही नहीं कि प्राइस से इसको मेंटेन कराने की कोशिश करें एंड देन ट्राई टू प्रोटेस्ट ऑन दैट और एनीथिंग. It's not their
Like if it's a
job.
narrow range, then the prices are almost fixed.
Yeah, again, it's not in their domain. प्रोडक्ट मार्केट के अंदर जाके किसी किस्म का प्रोटेस्ट करें दैट. ट्रेड यूनियन का काम है वर्कर्स वेज निगोशिएशन, ग्रीवियंसेस को डील करना, वर्क एंड सेफ्टी हेल्थ उसको देखना. फॉर देम इट्स नॉट रियली कि हमने प्राइसेस को मेंटेन कराना है और समथिंग लाइक दैट. I don't think it falls in their domain to do that. Um, yeah, so other than that, they can protest to the government कि आप क्यों prices को fix कर रहे हो. But then again, we're going outside buffer stock. Buffer stock का concept is we're trying to maintain the prices, surplus, shortage, इनके साथ हमने deal करना है. Not over price management or something.
What if firms
I
want to
would
charge different
avoid.
prices?
They would what?
Firms want to charge different prices.
Workers want to charge.
Firms.
Firms. या अब उसके अंदर ये हो सकता है. यूजुअली बफर स्टॉक would apply to agriculture markets and essential goods के अंदर ये होता है ये. Buffer stock would not happen in a mobile market or something like that. Biscuits or something. Private sector के अंदर. It has to be something which generally people are buying and selling stuff. तो उस केस के अंदर it is quite possible that producers might say कि we want to charge a higher price, लेकिन अगर आप फिर तो that means कि आप demand supply से हट रहे हैं. At the end of the day, the prevailing thing is the demand and the supply. If the demand and the supply is here, okay, then the producers should not be wanting to charge a higher price because that's going to create a disequilibrium. Agar, let's suppose demand and supply is shifting in such a way that the prices are continuously, जैसे यहाँ supply short हुआ, एकदम से prices wants to go above. So, जहां तक producer का ताल्लुक है, the government will come and they're going to allow the producers to sell the product जो भी उन्होंने produce किया है at a particular range, and then they are intervening. What we want to be careful, let me just digress from here for a minute. There is something called price support. That's a different whole thing. यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? यहाँ पे demand and the supply is operating, and the government is in no way dictating anything to the producers. They are trying to manage the prices based on whatever happening is in the market. So, इसको मुझे ऐसे समझाने दो. Let me do this. जहां तक फार्मर्स की इनकम का सवाल है, फार्मर्स की बफर स्टॉक में फार्मर्स की इनकम स्टेबलाइज नहीं होती है. एंड बफर स्टॉक का काम इज नॉट टू स्टेबलाइज फार्मर्स इनकम. Okay, it's to stabilize the prices of the good and bring certainty into the market. That's what they're trying. Let's suppose farmers end up producing good harvest and the supply increases. इसमें क्या होगा? Normally, the prices would have fallen down and quantity would have increased. Farmers may have made more revenues or not, depending on the elasticity. Usually, the demand curve is supposed to be inelastic, so they're actually going to lose revenue. That is what will happen. But government क्या करती है? Prices को stable करने के लिए they buy this excess. Let's take extreme and let's say that they will buy the entire excess. अब farmers के revenue को क्या हुआ? Well, originally the farmers were making this much revenue. Supply demand, this is their original revenue, this is what they're making. If the supply has increased and the prices fall down, then the farmer's revenue is this, which in this case, we can clearly see that the farmer's revenue has fallen and the prices have gone down. This is what would have happened if there was no buffer stock scheme. Now that we have buffer stock scheme, the government is intervening and they are purchasing this excess. Farmer ko, they got that black area and they got this red area also. The farmer's income has actually gone up. So they must be happy about this whole situation here. However,
Only affects farmers.
मेनली फार्मर्स या बिकॉज एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर जब ये आप लगाते हैं तो फार्मर्स से ही तो आप परचेजिंग कर रहे हैं ना, तो फार्मर्स का रेवेन्यू जो है वो बढ़ जाएगा इस केस के अंदर. इट्स ओनली अबाउट फार्मर्स या एग्रीकल्चर के केस में बफर स्टॉक होता ही फार्मर्स के लिए है.
Supply of other products doesn't change that fast.
नहीं, उसका के ऊपर तो कुछ भी नहीं है. बफर स्टॉक, nobody uses buffer stock other than essential agriculture products. You don't see buffer stock in meat industry, livestock industry. You just only see it in agriculture, और वो भी बहुत ही मेन essential goods के अंदर होती है. एंड ज्यादातर तुम्हारे पास भी जब रेफरेंस आएगा क्वेश्चन के अंदर, इट विल हैव टू डू विद एग्रीकल्चर, बिकॉज बफर स्टॉक का पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट ही एग्रीकल्चर मार्केट के ऊपर लिमिट हुआ हुआ है, एटलीस्ट फॉर योर कोर्स पर्पसेस. You can't apply it to any other product market, buffer stock का case. Okay. In the second scenario, what I want to explain is that ठीक है जी, farmers revenue, how much money are they making if there was no changes in the supply issue? Because देखो ना, buffer stock and you want to price maintain, so the whole issue is that agriculture market depends a lot on the weather. And best when these sort of like unwanted flood आ गया, एकदम से crisis situation create हो गई. So what we want to do is we want to maintain the prices. Now let's suppose if there is a poor harvest. When there is a poor harvest, our supply curve wants to shift to the left, something like this. अब इस केस के अंदर normally what would have happened is that the prices would or should have gone up. Farmers most likely would make more revenue under the circumstances, considering the demand curve is supposed to be inelastic. They would make higher revenues depending on the elasticity. But what happens is, if the government is trying to maintain the prices, and let's suppose वो लोग क्या करते हैं कि ये जो shortage हुई थी वो release कर देते हैं market के अंदर, so from the farmer's point of view, the only revenue farmers are making is this much. That's it. Because supply has fallen, so farmers' income has fallen. Poor harvest के case के अंदर, farmers are losing. in a buffer stock, in a situation of excess, ये जो मैंने अभी एक limitation में एक point लिखाया था, that farmers might exploit the buffer stock scheme, वो मैं इस point of view से बात कर रहा था, that what they'll do is they'll try to increase the supply every single year, knowing that they will not allow the prices to fall so much. हाँ, ये जरूर हो सकता है कि अगर प्रोड्यूसर ज्यादा ही जबरदस्ती ज्यादा सप्लाई करते जाएं, तो दे माइट नॉट बाय द सरप्लस एंड दे माइट अलाउ द प्राइसेस टू फॉल डाउन if the producers are over exploiting the whole situation. But जहां तक बात है फार्मर्स की इनकम स्टेबिलिटी की, बफर स्टॉक हैज नथिंग टू डू विद फार्मर्स income stability. All it has to do with is maintain the price fluctuation in case of a good and a bad harvest. Income support जो हम जिसकी बात करते हैं, that's a different idea. Income support के अंदर farmers की income को आप maintain करने की कोशिश करते हैं. So that's a different point. What we want to do is we want to avoid, the question is about buffer stock. So we want to avoid talking about the other side, which is the other policies in this case. Yeah. So evaluation के अंदर क्या आएगा? Based on the question, as you can see, they're talking about assess whether the benefits of a buffer stock scheme for an agriculture product always outweighs its disadvantages. So we want to make a comparison of advantages versus disadvantages. Potential effectiveness की हमने बात करनी है इसके अंदर. Price fluctuation, as we've mentioned in the advantages, is good. It stabilizes the economy, obviously. But obviously, it depends on the government's constraints. It depends on the funds they have. It depends on the type of the product, the nature of the product. Is it storable or not? If it's not storable, obviously it will be more difficult to manage the buffer stock, and the disadvantages may outweigh the advantages. Yeah, so इसके अंदर mostly तो I think the disadvantages are more if the government does not have a very good way of managing the buffer stock. So यहाँ पे आप शॉर्ट रन लॉन्ग रन की बात कर सकते हैं. यहाँ आप एडवांटेजेस डिसएडवांटेजेस सॉरी you can talk about certain type of economies like developed के अंदर they have good monitoring system कि पूरे मुल्क में कितना प्रोडक्शन प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है, कितना कंजम्पशन हो रहा है. So that helps you predict कि कितना बफर स्टॉक रखने की जरूरत है, कितना रिलीज करने की जरूरत है, and they might be able to run it more effectively. But if you don't have these systems, then you're going to be making a lot of mistakes, and that might create disincentive for the producers. Sometimes miscalculation might lead the prices to go up and might hurt the consumers. So somewhere along this line, you have to talk about the advantages and disadvantages, but the main question is about the extent that you can successfully maintain this or not. कोई alternative policy की कोई discussion की जरूरत नहीं है. Question is specifically about this,
Can't talk
right?
about exports and imports.
Export and import. Well, if you can talk about export and import, but that only comes in a situation if you create that scenario that, for example, perishable situation agar hai and the government cannot keep excess stock of it. So then if the shortage happens, how easily the government can import and fill the market. you can talk about that. Uh, or at the same time, if there is an excess, then you can export. But whenever you talk about the import and export, be mindful that export and import will only be successful if the price of import and export, जो world prices होती हैं और जो आपकी prices हैं, they need to be somewhat aligned. If your prices are higher than the world prices, then you can't sell the excess in the world market. तो फिर वो world prices पे depend करता है. Even if you have, like for example, आपका buffer stock के अंदर you don't have enough in the stock, right? And market के अंदर prices ऊपर जा रही हैं because of the shortage, like in our diagram. If the prices wants to go up, आपके पास shortage buffer stock में नहीं रखा हुआ to release, so you would want to import some. But if the price of imported goods are high, then importing and selling it into the market, either you're going to sell it at low prices so that people can afford it, तो government का expense बढ़ गया, because sort of like government is subsidizing the whole thing. Otherwise, अगर आप import की prices पे बेचने जाओगे, तो then the prices will go up because import prices were already very high. So whenever in these circumstances, whenever we want to consider the idea कि ठीक है जी excess है तो export कर लेते हैं, shortage है तो import कर लेते हैं, I think it's a wise idea to then talk about कि world prices needs to be aligned also then in that case. Right? All right. So this was one of our question, and then there was a question 23 के अंदर ही for a different variant. There's another question on this. Let me show you. Yeah, it's about assess the effectiveness of government intervention through buffer stock scheme in agriculture markets. So it's pretty much the similar standard question which we just discussed. Let me just walk you through the marking scheme for this one because I think pretty much we have talked about it. इसके अंदर इन्होंने फिर भी एक रीजनेबल हमारे को एक अच्छा सा वो दे दिया था. Effectiveness of government intervention through buffer stock scheme, right? So similar idea. इसमें diagram नहीं मांगा है, so there is no need for the diagram. Government interventions की बात हुई हुई है. So government intervention के अंदर first you have to talk about the for and the against argument of buffer stock. It's a must. You can't or talk about alternatives without doing this. So we know, okay, number one, buffer stock is to maintain the prices, right? Uh, Obviously, it has to do with the marking conditions. It involves the minimum and the maximum. If you want to do the diagram for your explanation of how buffer stock works, I think one of the main things you have to do is how buffer stock works, sort of like explains the advantage also in a way. Storage of product can be used to influence price changes, can be inefficient when surplus ends up building up. Too many years of surplus, too much surplus you have, पेरिशेबिलिटी की वजह से प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है. प्रोड्यूसर्स के लिए इंसेंटिव चेंज हो सकते हैं. सो बेसिकली you're doing the advantages and the disadvantages of the buffer stock जो हमने पिछले पूरे क्वेश्चन के अंदर किया है. That can give you like up to level 2 5 marks. Level 3 पे जाने के लिए I think you might have to discuss alternative. एक alternative at least discuss करना जरूरी है. Otherwise, the answer will be considered one-sided. दूसरी तरफ गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन के अंदर ऑब्वियसली सब्सिडीज, उससे सप्लाई कर्व राइट पे चला जाता है, प्राइसेस कम डाउन, प्रोड्यूसर्स आर हैप्पी बिकॉज दे आर गेटिंग हायर प्राइस, सो फॉर देम इट वर्क्स. एक्सपोर्ट कंट्रोल भी एक पॉलिसी है जो इंडिया यूज करता है अपने सर्टेन प्रोडक्ट्स के अंदर, क्योंकि जब आप एक्सपोर्ट कर देते हैं कुछ सर्टेन अमाउंट, जैसे पाकिस्तान के केस में हमने वीट या कॉटन को हम एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं एवरी ईयर, थिंकिंग कि हमारे पास सरप्लस प्रोडक्शन है, सो लेट्स एक्सपोर्ट इट। नाउ दैट यू एक्सपोर्ट इट, यू रियलाइज कि मार्केट में तो सप्लाई कम हो गई है, तो लोकल मार्केट में प्राइसेस ऊपर चली जाती हैं उसके लिए, तो उसके लिए फिर कंज्यूमर सफर करता है। तो समटाइम्स द गवर्नमेंट वांट्स टू इम्पोज दैट। लेकिन अगर एक्सेस सप्लाई हो गई है एंड द गवर्नमेंट फील्स कि हम एक्सपोर्ट करके प्रोड्यूसर्स के रेवेन्यूज को बेसिकली मैनेज कर सकते हैं, and the producers can end up making reasonable amount of profit if they have produced surplus and we can sell it. So, that would be fine also. Like, and we don't want that to happen over here. उसके अलावा obviously the advantages and the disadvantages of the other policies you want to place in. There's talking about less intervention, more emphasis on market forces, improved security of supply for domestic markets. Um, Let me go back to the question. Effectiveness of government intervention through buffer stock scheme and agriculture market. क्वेश्चन बड़ा सा वेग सा है, क्वेश्चन के अंदर they're not really talking about के गवर्नमेंट की क्या intentions है। If since they're saying कि buffer stock scheme को लेके चल रहे हैं, तो our intention should be that the government actually wants to maintain um, the prices. Their concern is not about the farmer's income or whatever. तो हमें ये पता है बफर स्टॉक स्कीम के अंदर डिमांड एंड सप्लाई, यू आर अलाउइंग द डिमांड एंड द सप्लाई टू कंटिन्यूअसली ऑपरेट। सब्सिडीज भी जब आप देते हैं तो डिमांड सप्लाई फोर्सेस आर अप्लाइंग। टैरिफ्स ऑन इंपोर्ट जब आप लगाते हैं तो उसमें इकोनॉमी के अंदर प्राइसेस एक्चुअली गोज अप। आई एम थिंकिंग एएस का जो हमारा डायग्राम होता है, प्राइस जिसमें शॉर्टेज क्रिएट हो जाती है जब आप टैरिफ्स लगाते हैं, डोमेस्टिक प्रोड्यूसर्स को हेल्प मिल जाता है थ्रू टैरिफ्स, तो वो प्रोडक्शन अपनी बढ़ा देते हैं। पर सब्सिडीज की अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट की एक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू हो गया तुम्हारा। आई फील कि ये वाले क्वेश्चन की थोड़ी सी वेग marking scheme, and my opinion, I think we should have a proper discussion on this one with the recent one also. So we'll do that in the next lecture or something.